Hello, everyone, and welcome to another audio podcast. In this series, the ZtormTronix case review v2 or v2, sorry. And in this audio podcast, um, um, I will provide a kind of a an sort of an understanding around some works and some research that has in part been highlighted in a previous audio podcast series. However, I'm going to provide this context in in a bit more of a in a bit more in a bit more sort of an overview, where I will highlight some aspects around the data that's been collected around this research, but also I will highlight some aspects of where in relating to where the research and where the research um, sort of looks to, where the research has looked to looked to develop following this works. And this work has been put forward for peer review to an appropriate academic journal. It has been presented at a conference remit around sort of nephrology and kidney practices in the United Kingdom, and at the same time, works have been put forward in another in relating to another sort of effort from another sort of conference remit, to highlight the works on a more in a more sort of in a more sort of a sort of international sort of perspective, where at least a specific area of healthcare and practice is concerned. And so I'm going to provide this as an overview. Once again, this is a Shientist, and this is an audio podcast on educational support surrounding chronic kidney disease (CKD), and it is a qualitative inquiry. This is another Storm Robotics production. So to start off with, I'm going to highlight highlight in this works some some background context to begin with. So chronic kidney disease is a slow decline in general health, with, for example, where there's malnourishment and wasting related to disease, related to decreased appetite and progressive metabolic disturbance. However, patients are living longer, and more awareness through local solutions and community and social media platforms have supported to inform and deliver health improvements for chronic kidney disease patients, and in those patients who are suspect or high risk for end-stage renal disease. The inclusion of service users is growing, but it has not been evaluated or contextualized around or surrounding educational provision and the use of social media platforms. So the aims and the objectives around this work was to include was to include the following to understand how healthcare and education for chronic kidney disease patients encourage patients to take ownership of healthcare. So the objectives of the research were specifically: number one, to describe how chronic kidney disease patients are managed in between healthcare sectors with a view to capture and analyze qualitative data from perspectives of patients and professionals; and two, understand options for obtaining advice to understand options for obtaining advice and educational support through an online platform. The works in aligned to the aims and objectives. There was a specific research question. So the research question was thus: so this UK study seeks to understand educational support surrounding chronic kidney disease and explore patient and allied health professional perspectives. So, in line with this, CKD and the role of education. So a bit of background context in related to chronic kidney disease and the role of education. So there is evidence to suggest that more health promotion in the community can also support some of the education complexities relating to health and disease. A need is found to educate the educators in the chronic care model and through a population health approach. It is perceived educators manage a chronic disease well, yet found in research in literature in works where researchers investigators have found at the same time prevention and early detection to be at the hard end. And so there is now an increasing body of research focusing on linking education, literacy, peer support, and peer support. Therefore, it is now perhaps more transparent that integration of point of care and surrounding point of care is becoming more important to patients with long-term conditions, where especially healthcare is becoming more remote. This, however, also presents an opportunity for allied health professionals to be involved in supporting areas of healthcare and education through digital medium. The online space, open quote, close quote, the online space is also where patients seek out answers to important clinical and diagnostic questions. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the methodology in this particular research. So the research a research scientist investigator looked to approach this research where for example, apart from being a scientist investigator, they look to be a facilitator and not a healthcare and not so much a healthcare scientist in context of this research, thus adjusting the use of what is referred to as a topic guide to effectively fit the participant involved. And at times this required the research scientist investigator to also play a slightly more active role, providing background of research to fulfill inclusion and exclusion criteria and help inform the sequence of activities. The justification for using and implementing what's known as a qualitative methodology design is that it tends to help answer multifaceted questions. Similarly, methodologies have also been used to help inform and help answer questions relating to healthcare education. And so through co-development, the research scientist investigator in prompting this work also organized two high street community workshops, which were based in the Bristol Southwest region in the United Kingdom, in May 2019 and in June 2019. And so patient and public involvement, or PPI, had been an important mechanism. Involving patients has led to achieving rigor throughout this work. And as part of this investigation, or part of the research, there were 13 team members, where 7 admin and moderator members from the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and six from the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group, or KDARS for Kids, attended the workshops. And basic evaluation and feedback provided an understanding of patients' perspectives surrounding access to healthcare education to focus this research. The workshops were co-developed. The workshops were co-developed between patients, researcher, and co-founders between the two social media platforms. Following workshops, an activity referred to aligned to the workshop, a topic tagging activity was implemented between the two platforms. So in following the workshops, a third renal workshop event also took place in collaboration between the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group, or KDARS for Kids, in October 2019, wherein topics between the two global social media platforms were co-developed, having understood aims and remit of the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group, KDARS for Kids. Tags or topic tags were co-developed against 14, that's 14 different topics, having investigated over 1 month, March and April 2020, when most popular health in related to most popular healthcare terminologies. And so topics were tagged for 2 weeks per social media platform. So, for example, 2 weeks through the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, the RPSG relating to aligned to the adult renal population online, and then 2 weeks also through KDARS, the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group, the KDARS social media platform, representing young pediatrics and young people with going through chronic kidney disease or forms of renal disease. Topic tagging example was implemented following research outlined by several investigators or researchers that had published works relating to sort of the specific aspects that pertain to the definitions around topic tagging, for example, that had been highlighted. So, for example, in works by Morrison in 2005 did works around topic tagging, where the investigator looked at message board topic tagging and user tagging of collectively owned community content, and it was works that had been published in an American based journal. And there's works by Sivian Sivan and Pratt in 2007, where they looked at threading together patient expertise, which was also published in as an annual symposium as an annual symposium in another American journal. And there's works by Zhong in 2021 more recently, where Zhong looked at a method of filtering bad text in network-based on topic sensitive words tagging, and it was actually published in a journal of physics in related to a conference paper. So these researchers for this works these three papers or these publications formed a basis in relating to at least aspects that pertain to the topic tagging activity that took place in this work. And so following that, there was then an effort to link the topic tagging activities along with the other aspects of this research. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about that in context of the ethics application process and the approval around that in this research. So so this research proposal or the work had undergone both academic and NHS ethics approval process, highlighting all aspects of the research. General Data Protection Regulation or GDPR 2018 guidelines were also implemented to ensure best practice surrounding confidentiality, data protection and compliancy. Information sheets and consent forms were produced to inform participants the intention and outcomes. The research was appraised according to Academic Ethics Committee and NHS ethics prior and before starting any data collection and all other aspects of this investigation. The research protocol ID for this investigation was linked to the Northwest Greater Manchester South Research Ethics Committee and as with all research, this research also had a project ID as well. The ethics processes covered a broad focus, including robustness of research design, research integrity, and transparency to ensure confidentiality and anonymity surrounding data protection, security, and informed consent. Information sheets and consent forms were produced to inform potential participants the intentions and outcomes of the research. All compulsory documentation such as information sheets, consent forms, introduction research flyers were approved by the academic institution and NHS ethics and NHS ethics or National Health Service ethics approval. Now with this, I'm going to now highlight some aspects in line with the ethics application process and the ethics application approval sort of documentation. There was absolutely necessity to highlight context in line with the ethics and with the ethics application process, and also in relating to the rigor and integrity of the research. There was a necessity to highlight aspects in relating to what's known as sort of the trustworthiness and reflexivity surrounding the research. So I'm now going to highlight a little bit around qualitative data integrity, reflectivity, and trustworthiness of the data. And there are papers that highlight the importance of trustworthiness and integrity and reflexivity aspects more in qualitative research, more so in some contexts than, for example, quantitative data research and any other kind of research. So ethics applications and documentation was completed to enable qualitative data collection and integrity. And as part of the process, something known as inductive content analysis, or ICA, was implemented owing to the nature of the research question. And as I mentioned, the research question in some contexts was quite open-ended. And so in line with the research question, the investigatory team, when doing the research around the work, I'm referring it was important, again, to refer. It was important for the investigatory team to refer back to particular papers and publications in relating to this because of the nature of the research question. And so to achieve robust research, a checklist for researchers attempting to improve the trustworthiness of a content analysis study was outlined. And in the full works, which in time will be available through the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, there is a list of citations and references, and several papers by authors have outlined trustworthiness of a content analysis study in relating to qualitative data. And so using the checklist the content analysis content analysis investigation and checklist have been are available through the public through some of the citations in this that have been listed in this publication, in this manuscript, in this work. So using this checklist and evidence relating examples of best practice was of utmost importance. Several texts were followed to ensure underpinnings of qualitative data and inductive content analysis integrity. And again, there are several papers or citations that relate to that aspect. These references or citations help provide a basis and a checklist for academic rigor. So in this research, the research scientist investigator played actually three particular roles. So there was a part where the investigator played the scientist in aspects of the research. Then there was then also played the researcher, the actual researcher, the researcher in most of this research, and then there was a part where the investigator, the lead investigator, played the patient as well, basically patient suffering and going through chronic kidney disease themselves, to effectively encourage involvement and discussion based on topic guides, and thus providing lived experiences to participants who met the inclusion and exclusion criteria as well. So telephone interviews were used to save time, encourage trustworthiness, having built the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group for Kids, or KDARS for Kids, relationship through social media and workshops to encourage inclusion and diversity of patients and involvement. A pre-interview, a discussion with participants fulfilled the ethical obligations, ensuring that patients were informed on the nature of research and were clear on expectations. Scheduled telephone interviews were conducted to ensure a high number of participants and positive interview experiences. Because let's be honest, there's nothing worse than having a researcher approach participants, and where the participant feels less than enthusiastic if the researcher investigator doesn't feel immersed or involved themselves. So guidance was sought from the supervisory team, the academic supervisory team, and several texts to gain understanding of process flow to ensure academic rigor. Interviews conducted were balanced with an informal requirement to respond to questions asked by the research scientist investigator. Participants were informed they would receive a research summary following completion of the research. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the data protection, and a little bit more around GDPR practices and privacy, the privacy aspects and storage around the research. So all data retrieved from telephone interviews were stored using a software during and after analyses. So software was installed on a password protected computer on the academic institution grounds. All information participants provided was confidential and used for the purposes of this investigational study, only used for the purpose of this purpose to investigate the research question. The data was collected and stored in accordance with the General Data Protection Regulation 2018, and any unnecessary data was disposed of in a secure manner. Data, especially paper copies, were only accessed by those on the research team. All participant data had been collected. All participant data had and was collected outside academic institution grounds and housed on a secure server with firewall protection within the academic institution itself. So now I'm going to talk a little bit around the topic guides, the telephone interviews, the schedules, and the support that had been part of academic practice. So participants were informed of telephone interview schedules and once organized. This information was outlined in a research recruitment flyer. Participant information sheets were made available either at recruitment site or through the Renal Patient Support Group, and outlined how telephone interviews would take place. The research scientist investigator provided contact details to all participants so they have opportunities for questions. At times, it was also important to remind participants regarding schedules, and this was achieved sending an email communication, or by telephone correspondence. Introductory letter or flyer was available to read with information sheets, topic guides, and consent forms with the research team details on all documentation. Topic guides were also used to provide basic content and structure of semi-structured qualitative interviews. Scheduled telephone interviews were conducted to ensure data generated was high quality and participants had positive interview experiences. Guidance was again sought from several texts, several publications to gain an understanding of process again around process and flow in relating to qualitative research, and to ensure academic rigor. And guidance was implemented from the academic supervisory team. Interviews conducted were balanced and had an informal requirement offered by the research scientist investigator. Interviews seeked to address the research question and objectives, gaining perspectives across 4 different cohorts, whilst recognizing that everyone had a different understanding and experience. Participants were briefed prior or before interview recording and involved retrieving consent, and participants were involved about the nature of research and expectations. The research scientist investigator informed participants that interviews were to be recorded and highlighted formality of the interview process according to several publications and works that have implemented qualitative research that was similar. Therefore, interviews were conducted in a private setting. To help reduce interview bias, participants were also informed that it would be important to provide views in regards to long-term conditions according to literature and wider healthcare. The topic guide or topic guides instrument included a closing discussion which reflected on themes and points raised during interviews, providing an opening for participants to reflect on the interview content. Participants were provided the research scientist, investigator, and research team contact information as mentioned, and telephone interviews were implemented and audio recorded after taking consent. So a little bit around in relating to the sites and participant identification. So the local clinical research networks helped identify general practitioners or GPs and or nurse practitioners in Southwest England, United Kingdom. The Royal College of Physicians, the Royal College for Physicians also helped identify GPs. The Institute of Biomedical Sciences, the IBMS, helped identify scientists or biomedical scientists, and with biomedical scientists specifically who had clinical chemistry or biochemistry backgrounds. And then the Association of Clinical Biochemistry helped identify clinical and consultant scientists. The North Bristol NHS Trust, NBT, helped identify renal clinicians or nephrologists, and the chief administrators or the moderators for the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, helped identify patients going through chronic kidney disease, and specifically chronic kidney disease stages 3 to 5 in context of severity for a single telephone interview. So participants only had to participate in one interview at the time of this. I'm now going to talk a little bit about the participant approach. Apart from apart from the sites and participant identification. After that was done, then there was the an approach aspect to the to this as well. So prior recruiting, or before formally recruiting, the research scientist investigator approached participants to identify if were deemed suitable to be involved in this investigation through face-to-face and telephone communication. Contact details for participants were made available for participants in approach to were made available for participants to approach the research scientist investigator, and so that they had the opportunity to retrieve more information about the research before making a formal decision of getting involved. The research scientist investigator, as part of the process, sought informed consent after providing overview of the investigation. Now, a little bit about the recruitment aspect in relating to this research. So before recruiting or formally recruiting participants, the research scientist investigator established whether a potential participant is suitable or was suitable to be involved in this investigation through telephone and email communication. Potential participants had the opportunity to ask questions about the investigation, and the research scientist investigator also informed participants that this research would be used, that this work would only be used for research purposes, or research purposes only. And a research introductory flyer, information sheets, topic guides, and consent forms were made available before recruitment. Something in relating to this, something known as quota sampling was used. Quota sampling was used and allowed the research scientist investigator to ensure that there is or was equal or a proportionate representation of participants depending on age, race, gender, and education. And this process also prevented a selection bias. A dedicated advertising section of the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG website, was organized by the RPSG website team once ethics applications had been granted through the academic institutions ethics committee, and the National Health Service ethics board to recruit patients and health professionals. The web page allowed the research scientist investigator to display research flyers, participant information sheets, topic guides, and consent forms. The RPSG website details, the Renal Patient Support Group RPSG website details were made available to all participants to complete. Was made available, and there is within the manuscript there is an actual link or URL which highlights specifically where the works, where research flyers, etc. could be identified. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the analysis aspects before highlighting a little bit around the results of this work and this research. So the analysis involves something known as, or referred to as, inductive content analysis, or ICA. An inductive content analysis as a research methodology is a systematic and objective means of describing and quantifying phenomena. There's works and publications that authors have highlighted, have works that has implemented inductive content analysis. ICA is also known as a methodology of analyzing documents. So ICA allows an investigator to test theoretical issues to enhance understanding of the data. And it is assumed that when classified into the categories words and phrases, ICA, inductive content analysis data creates meaning. And so in line with that, I'm going to highlight a little bit around inductive content analysis basis of analysis. So the interview data was initially presented thematically, and thereafter analysis involved an added layer implementing inductive content analysis to contextualize qualitative data collected. ICA also helped understand context of context relating health professionals and chronic kidney disease patients. Since this research was multifaceted, a theoretical and coding framework with ICA inductive content analysis phases helped highlight understanding surrounding chronic kidney disease according to public health and educational needs for patients to contextualize. So in line with this, I'm going to talk a little bit around the process, ICA process of analysis. So ICA was implemented in this research because there has been little or no sort of prior knowledge contribution to research that seeks to answer the question. And so what has been highlighted in literature is that where knowledge surrounding education is fragmented, ICA approach has been recommended. The categories were derived from data in and through inductive content analysis. Researchers are prompted or have been prompted to understand at some level of detail sampling considerations before selecting the unit of analysis. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the inductive content analysis applications. ICA has and was notably applied across several areas in health research health research investigations. In broad context, ICA can be applied to also help understand and explain patterns of sequences of qualitative data. It thus helps investigators and audience to appreciate conditions across data set. Now that's very important. It's important I say that because generally when looking at qualitative data, automatically irrespective of sort of expertise at whatever level in related to qualitative research or qualitative data, generally automatically researchers and investigators automatically look for data that kind of almost jumps out as basically as a way of highlighting generally what the research has highlighted just from a small set of the data that had been collected when generally ICA inductive content analysis again looks to understand understand, by implementing inductive content analysis specifically, it looks to understand and explain sequences of the data, what the data is saying through different aspects of the process. So it thus helps investigators and audience to appreciate the conditions across the data set, and researchers implement inductive content analysis to obliquely or unambiguously as an analysis tool to generate theoretical suggestions. So inductive content analysis in context of application generally is used to help researchers develop a sort of a framework or a guideline, but also prompt sort of a suggestion of what the data could be showing the investigator, or highlighting to the investigator. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about inductive content analysis and measurement of error. So inductive content analysis is also a tool to help assess both intricate and fragmented questions, because let's not forget, when even research questions or any particular question is generally only as good as the person who's asking the question, at least in some contexts. So ICA is a tool to help assess both intricate and fragmented questions of a very specific type. So investigations that seek to implement inductive content analysis or subcategories thereof is where potential uncertainty can arise if against a research question, and thus hypotheses or condition being explored as well. So I'm just going to repeat that. Investigations that seek to implement inductive content analysis or subcategories thereof is where potential uncertainty can arise if against a research question, hypotheses, or a condition being explored. And the measurement of error is or will be was applied in this research, and implementing a guideline summarized by one of the references or citations that had been referred to in this work, and thus through preparation, organization and reporting phases accordingly. Now, I mentioned sort of the analysis approach. I'm now going to just say a few words in relating to inductive ICA, inductive content analysis, in relating to themes using a particular software package, to help with the analysis approach. So having become acquainted with the transcript data, and the software had been used in part to allow the generating of initial codes for inductive content analysis, and software provided the opportunity to classify, sort, and arrange transcript context, and thus allowing time to analyze data and glean insight and overall develop conclusions using something that was referred to as coding density. Coding density in part as a facility through the software was particularly helpful, because coding density has helped support the tracking of analyses surrounding inductive content analysis and semi-structured surrounding semi-structured topic guides, where they were developed to help prompt data collection across different participant cohorts. Now, the manuscript itself, or this research and the manuscript in related to qualitative data, anyone who's done qualitative data research knows that generally with the research there can be a lot of context. So for the purpose of this audio, and podcast, in this particular series, I'm not going to highlight all of the qualitative context that has come out of the research by highlighting what different participants had said specifically. However, I will highlight the different themes in relating to the different cohorts that had been interviewed. So, for example, under the general practitioners or primary care physicians, for example, one of the main themes was understanding of chronic kidney disease and the perception of kidney healthcare. Another theme was education in healthcare surrounding long-term conditions. Another theme was education through technology and digital healthcare. Another theme was future roles of allied health professionals. And another theme was screening and renal biomarkers. And another theme, and the final theme for the general practitioners or family physicians or primary care physicians was safety and governance. And I'm going to highlight some of the themes that related and pertained to healthcare scientists, who are also referred to in this context, in this works, as allied health professionals. So one of the main themes was education through technology and digital healthcare. Another theme was future roles of allied health professionals. Future roles of allied health professionals. I'm now going to highlight some of the themes in relating to the nephrologists or clinicians. And the themes here included, for example, understanding of chronic kidney disease and perception of kidney healthcare. Another theme was education through technology and digital healthcare. Another theme was health literacy and professionalism. And another theme was future roles of allied health professionals. For chronic kidney disease patients, the following themes had been identified. So, understanding of chronic kidney disease and perception of kidney healthcare, appropriate educational support, perception of healthcare professionals, digital technology, education through technology and digital healthcare, healthcare communication, influences on willingness to take ownership of health, and within all of the within the works, again, on purpose, I'm not gonna read everything from the data set specifically, but those hopefully give sort of a sort of an overview of the particular themes that had been derived from this research. I'm now going to provide a sort of a sort of overview in context of the discussion and then the conclusion around this work. So the discussion is thus: so whilst there was some overlap relating to themes and inductive content analysis, the research has highlighted that online spaces can be or could be used inventively to help highlight how patient and public involvement can also play a role on developing educational support through healthcare systems. All chronic kidney disease patients were in between chronic kidney disease stages 4 and chronic kidney disease stages 5 in relating to disease severity. Telephone interviews were short, so for example, I haven't highlighted in here so much, but typically the interviews with patients were around 45 minutes long in duration. Interviews with health professionals, health professional cohorts, was about 30 minutes long in duration. So telephone interviews were short, but allowed participants to put forward views and understanding relating to educational needs and patient care. Using inductive content analysis approach has helped, or had helped gain a rounded understanding of the research question and healthcare requirements specific to chronic kidney disease sufferers. Additional context in relating to this is that by 2030, allied health professionals can perhaps expect to be better integrated into pathways working through, for example, group consultations. This would prompt a smarter working relationship across professions to drive an all-encompassing sort of approach to chronic kidney disease and wider long-term condition care pathways to convey better outcomes for patients' future. And there is scope for service development and initiatives relating patient care through education and peer support, but there needs to be coordinated effort between service users and providers to understand how it can be improved, including technology implementation for education provision. I'm just going to highlight a few points in relating a few aspects in relating to conclusion. So after documenting, interviews were critical in generating themes in preparation of inductive content analysis implementation. 19 telephone interviews between 4 cohorts were conducted with a requirement to respond. And this research informs that there is scope for educational service development and initiatives focusing on allied health professional involvement. But again, there needs to be a coordinated effort between service users and providers. And one thing that also came out of this in part was a point. There was a point of care education, or POCE, sort of aspect to this, where POCE could be integrated through online spaces. So, for example, the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and linked to electronic patient records, or EPRs. There are 2 schematics that are linked with this work, and one of the schematics summarizes a proposed educational sort of pathway for chronic kidney disease patients, and another schematic proposes a guide or an algorithm to assess CKD, chronic kidney disease patients, for advice or educational support. So integrating between electronic patient records and online spaces, this research informed that co-produced or co-developed educational modules could be delivered between patients and allied health professionals, and education modules could be linked through social media platforms, integrating a proposed education pathway for chronic kidney disease patients so that public health and research meet practice excellence. I'm now going to provide basically the main points, and there's only 5 points, five main points here. Point 1 is education healthcare professionals surrounding the importance of a patient role. Educating healthcare professionals surrounding the importance of the patient role and how to be more interactive with patient care still requires integrative practice. Targeting the attitudes and behaviors of providers through potential solutions is important so that the relationship between the patient and the provider is balanced and smarter. Point 3, patients and carers still want more face-to-face understanding of test results, and between the two social media platform initiatives, again, the Renal Patient Support Group and the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group, or KDARS for kids, and there has been implementation of pilot patient and allied health professional webinars to deliver educational support through media such as and for example through YouTube and Instagram. Point four, smarter working will help in meeting challenges on educational needs to support chronic kidney disease patients. This will also reduce fatigue, increase streamlining health services to reduce existing impacts. And number 5, and the final main point here, point 5, ultimately by joined up efforts between allied health professionals and chronic kidney disease patients, the aim between the two social media platforms is or has been to equip patients with education and knowledge base to ensure that they have a strong basis for shared decision making throughout kidney care. I want to draw this audio podcast now to a close. The works, as mentioned, is and will be available more formally through the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, in time. And once again, this has been an audio podcast surrounding educational support, surrounding chronic kidney disease, surrounding chronic kidney disease, and it's a qualitative inquiry between 2017 and 2022, and it's part of the ZtormTronix case review v.2. This has been the Shientist, and it's been another Storm Robotics production. Thank you for taking the time.